So here we can see a chronological layout of all my paintings since probably last summer until now. And on the outside ring, you can see some older ones. And as you get towards the center, there's more of the newer works. And when I started out this year, I kind of doubled down and really started focusing on portraiture and what it means to create a portrait of a person living in the digital age. Basically a time when we can manipulate the mirror of our face immediately and give ourselves bunny ears or make ourselves more beautiful with some beautification filter or whatever. We live in a time where our face is something that can be easily manipulated in all these programs. So when looking at people and, most of my so-called friends, especially on Facebook and these type of places, I'm interacting with almost exclusively in the virtual realm. So if I see an ex-girlfriend who I haven't seen in 10 years and I look at her online, I'm really experiencing this digital self which she's created and she's trying to put out into the world. So how best to make a painting of these types of people? And I researched as well about the history of portraiture, and that, I looked at King George and Hans Holbein and these types of early portraits. But kind of where I felt the most resonance personally were these post-World War II portraits done by people like Giacometti, Francis Bacon, Auerbach, even Alex Katz to an extent. They're all artists who used portraiture as a vehicle to tell a broader narrative about the times in which they lived. So in living in this time, in 2019, it's often associated with this concept of atemporality. And atemporality is essentially living in an age where you have access to all of history at once. Basically, the internet being the manifestation of this. But it's a time when all these genres intermingle, morph, and collide with one another. They are confused images. They are images which are somewhat falling apart, just as I think people's, the border between our in real life selves and our digital selves begins to blur more and more. So in addition to researching more about these types of concepts, I started creating a process by which I would use certain data points about people in the creation of the work itself. And this has a long history in our history as well. Even the television set is a reaction to electricity in a way. So television is, basically transforming current into images. And so there is a long history of playing with this, especially in glitch art and all this sort of stuff. But I started creating a process where some of these marks and some of the structure and skeleton of all these figures were created by marks made by my plotter based upon certain data sets about individuals. So part of the construction of the actual portrait is data about that person as well. In addition to that, I was working in the Techne lab downstairs, doing virtual painting with tilt brush, and also using the LZX video synthesizer downstairs, which takes raw current and raw voltage and translates it into pattern, shape, and color. And so some of these patterns have come into my works, and some of these maneuvers with the paint come into my works. But it all goes back to taking the three-dimensional world and making it flat. Even that's how we see 3D graphics and 3D imagery often, which is associated with the virtual. It still has to become flat. It still has to exist on a flat plane on a screen.